A live interview right here in our studios, and of course engage with us through this interview on our Twitter handle at KUTV Kenya. At Anki Doris is my personal handle. Now, tonight in studio, I am joined by our residential political analyst. He's also an author, specifically on political matters. And besides that, he has cut a niche in matters criminology. Now, he will give us more later on his bio. However, most of you are familiar with him. That is Mr. Samuel Tarwish. Welcome to the studio, sir. It's good to have you.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
A lot of Kenyans are looking forward to this interview because we have had a lot of political matters now striking our headlines and, of course, their TV screens, most of which Kenyans do not understand fully, but most of which they also want to be engaged in. For those who understand, they will also let us know if they are. However, today we witnessed, let's just start with gubernatorial seats, or what has been happening with the case that we've been following, that is Waiguru versus Martha Karua. And today we found a verdict that seems to be consistent in all the courts. Yes. Yeah. Let's just analyze this particular situation from your political view. Is it something that is deserving? What is the political angle of what we have just witnessed today, the verdict from the Supreme Court?
Very well, thank you so much, and to the viewer, of course, for joining us. And I think generally we all need to contend with the fact that once a matter has already been deliberated by the court, I mean, it remains so, because now that is the apex court we have in the country, the Supreme Court, and having ruled on that case that was actually appealed rather by Martha Karua. It does mean then there's no any other way out for Martha Karua, save for waiting up until maybe 2022, or if there's going to be any, God forbid, if there's maybe the MCAs are going to impeach Governor Ann Mumbi, or if there's going to be another way out for a vacancy in Kirinyaga. But as far as things are concerned now, she only but has to wait up until 2022. But away from that, I think it is important for Kenyans to understand, you know, sometimes when these politicians go to court, you know, when we go into an election, I mean, it's natural for losers most of the times to come out and say they weren't really happy with the entire process, but that probably there were malpractices in the entire electoral process. And so they feel like it is their constitutional right to go to the court to petition the outcomes or declarations by the electoral bodies. And that is what we have been seeing ever since we held the elections in 2017 up until now. In fact, you know, at some point I even got really, I forgot that there was another petition, or rather a verdict that we are waiting in the Supreme Court, only to see that the judges were actually giving that verdict today. But you see, more important is that when you're going to court to actually petition an outcome of an election, you have to make sure that you have enough evidence to substantiate any kind of claims that you have, and as far as how malpractices actually compromised the entire process of that election. So as for Martha Karua, understanding very well that she's actually a renowned lawyer, a person who understands the law, and also the person who was representing her, Gitobi Manyara, is actually a high-profile lawyer for that matter. So they've gone to the High Court, they've gone to the Court of Appeal, and eventually to the Supreme Court, but the verdict has remained the same, just like you alluded earlier. It does mean maybe Martha Karua did not have, probably at some point she didn't have sufficient evidence to convince the judges to overturn the victory of Ann Mumbi. Because again, if she had that enough evidence, which could have been adduced by the lawyers representing her, things could have been different as at now.
Oh, well, of course, at some point we lost you when you mentioned Ann Mumbi. What my political analyst here is talking about is Waiguru versus, that is Ann Waiguru. I know about political analysts, you can...
Actually, Ann Mumbi, she's called Ann
Mumbi Waiguru?
Wakamodo, something of the sort. Today she made it very clear that now she doesn't want to be called that.
Oh, she made it very clear.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, of course, we respect that. Now, let's cross over away from the leaders, because Kenyans sometimes say, you discuss too much of the leaders, how about us? Now, in that regard, we have been following closely the hashtag Punguza Mzigo, which I'm sure at this point you're very familiar with. We had tweets sampled yesterday with, of course, Kenyans bringing out their opinions, some for it, some against it. If you followed closely, it has been BBI versus, of course, Kuru Court's Punguza Mzigo, which at this point, of course, you've had, of course, Honorable Raila Odinga of ODM terming it or giving it a new name, Punguza punguza gunia. As a political analyst, you would want to explain to the Kenyan, what is punguza mzigo? Okay, why is it, according to Ukuru Accord, the center of Mwananchi?
Well,
and is it helpful, really?
Let's begin from here. It is important for us to underscore the fact that Ekuru Aukot is no ordinary person. Ekuru Aukot is a high-profile lawyer. He is a person also who actually participated in the making of the very constitution that we have today in Kenya. And Ekuru Aukot as well was a presidential candidate in 2017 general election. We understand that. Second, in as far as trying to see whether we can have a change in the constitution, this is not something that is limited to a particular group of people or a particular group of politicians. It is something that any ordinary Kenyan, including yourself and maybe me, who can go and get a million signatures, take to the IEBC, get the support or endorsement from the 24 counties, and get the support of the bicameral houses, that is National Assembly and the Senate. And I mean, the electoral body will not have an alternative or a choice but to conduct that a referendum. Okay. But as it is now, you know, as the Kenyan politics are, we always but want to subscribe with certain individuals or certain political figures, and that is what exactly is manifesting today. You've seen Raila Odinga coming out and dismissing Ekuru Aukot's initiative blanketly, without even pinpointing and saying probably there's a good thing here, we can pick and see how we can reconcile and package it together and present to Kenyans, so that as we go to vote now, we vote as one document, so that we do not have Ekuru Aukot going around and trying to marshal support, while we have the BBI, which was put in place by President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. Actually understand they have actually finished up the task. They are just but finalizing on documenting and handing over to the two leaders. More importantly, we have to acknowledge that this country is facing a myriad of challenges. We have gray areas in the constitution. We have some of the things that we really copy-pasted in the current constitution we have, which have proved not working. And we feel like as a country moving forward, and I think that is what generally most Kenyans actually share out there, they feel like there are certain things that we really need to correct. For instance, how are we going to ensure that we have inclusivity? How are we going to ensure that not any part of this country is going to feel, for example, balkanized, or they feel like they're left out in part and parcel of the governance of this country? There are places, for example, which are marginalized. How are we going to make sure that we are going to move forward as a people together? So I think that is the reasoning behind the formation of the BBI by President Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Yes. But as for Ekuru Aukot's initiative, I think it has some good things in it. For example, trying to see how we can reduce the wage bill. But you cannot just wake up and say the only way to reduce the wage bill is to decrease the number of the elected lawmakers, for example. I agree, for example, from where I sit, it's my opinion, that we probably have an extreme big representation when it comes to National Assembly, the county assemblies. Generally, in terms of governance, we have a very big representation. But it cannot be the only thing for us to really punguza the mzigo. It cannot be the only remedy for us to ensure that maybe the wage bill comes down. There are so many other things we need to see. For example, even fighting, ensuring that we eliminate corruption in our country. I mean, those are some of the areas that we really need to tackle. But my reasoning is this. Let's try to see where Ekuru Aukot is coming from. What are the things that are good from his side? How can we bring these all things together and reconcile them, the BBI and the Punguza Mzigo initiative, so that when Kenyans now go to the referendum eventually, because I understand they will have to go for this referendum, now that these leaders seem determined really to have this referendum, we are going to have it. Let's reconcile these two initiatives so that we can have one thing that Kenyans are going to deliberate on.
Mr. Samuel, what you have put very clear is that Kenyans need to understand before they go to the referendum, because a lot of people have the culture of we are just going to vote. Whoever it is, we will follow. So I think this time it's a challenge. What is hashtag Punguza Mzigo? We continue to follow up on that. But now, because you are here, sir, there is no way we will not highlight the current vacant positions that exist after, of course, cancer struck the country, ripped us off of two key leaders. That is, of course, may they rest in peace, the Member of Parliament, ex-Member of Parliament, Kibra, that is Ken Okoth. And of course, also Bomet is vacant. In that same line, we witnessed a visit today. I mean, it's historic. Since 2017, I don't know if you followed, Isaac Ruto visited, you know, Raila at the capital. We do not know, but you are here to explain from the political face. a lot of people also are questioning because there was a lot of, I would say, quote unquote, drama in Ken's, vacancy. Some people are of course suggesting certain people in the lineage should take over. Is it questioned? The question in question people are asking: is it inheritance now? And what is the political? What is the lookout now? What should Kenyans see from a political, with your political eye?
Well, let me begin from this. It's good for us to clarify that we do not have vacancies in all these, constituencies or even the counties. For example, in Bomet County, the constitution is very clear. I understand in about a day or two, on Thursday, I believe, the deputy governor, Dr. Barchok, is going to be sworn in as the governor. That is what the constitution explicitly, exhibits. We are going to have a deputy governor sworn in to take over for the remainder period. So the elections in Bomet County will actually take place when we are having elections again in 2022, unless something else just happens in between.
I like when you say unless something happens just in between.
Just like what has happened. You remember what happened, for example, God forbid, in Nyeri. We lost, of course, the governor there some time back, the first governor, you remember?
Yes.
And then we had the deputy governor taking over at some point, and then so many things. But again, it has happened. That's why I'm saying I'm giving that window, like, unless something happens, we just have to wait until 2022.
Right.
As for Kibrand, I think these are some of the things that we now need to see. The so-called learned friends, people who should be presenting views even to the BBI and Punguza Mzigo. How are we going to remedy such kind of situations where you have a lawmaker, for example, a case in Kibra, where we have now Ken Okoth, who is passed on, and we are going to subject electorates in that particular constituency into yet another election. How about if we maybe reasoned and see how we are going to maybe have a person, or say, for example, even a deputy or an assistant to MP. I believe it's a suggestion that is might elicit a lot of reaction, and people will feel we are going to heap more burden to the taxpayers again to try and foot the bills for these other people. It is important for us to understand that we are going to have, of course, elections there because now the position is vacant.
Yes.
You've asked a very pertinent question regarding the lineage. It's becoming like a family affair. People who have lost their kins, those who are in leadership position, they feel like they are entitled to take over from them. I think it is good for us to say this, that this should not be viewed as an entitlement, but sometimes it's just a feeling that because this person, for example, was elected on a particular ticket, you've seen the goodwill, for example, even when it comes to political parties themselves. The Jubilee Party saying we are not going to field as far as Nairobi Senator's comments to go by. Johnson Sakaja, that we are not going as Jubilee to field a candidate in Kibra constituency when we are going to have this by-election. That is just an express of goodwill from political parties or political players. And so when it comes to family as well, because it has been, presidents have been set before.
Yes.
We've had people die and their kins actually take over. Joyce Laboso, the late, actually took over that position as MP, I remember, for Sotik, when the sister died, that is Lona Laboso, sometime in 2008. And actually she had to take over because ODM gave her a direct ticket. The same thing happened with the, Moses Kajwang in Homa Bay. We've had Mutula Kilonzo Jr. in Makueni, and so many of such examples. But again, there's no entitlement that they have to get it. If at all they have to get this, then they have to get it in a right way. If it's about a nomination process, so that any person is going to feel like left out or disenfranchised, or they feel like this person who was given an advantage over the others who are really eyeing for this seat. All
right, we appreciate, of course, thank you so much for giving us that lineup. A lot of Kenyans are now understanding, though we're not saying they're really entitled to it. Well, thank you so much for that breakdown. Now, as we wrap up this particular, conversation, which we wish we had longer time for, politics is wide, but now ODM party, people have, in regards to the visit that we mentioned earlier on, this is historic. Is it regrouping? Isaac Ruto was, once a member. We've seen, Beth also being part of the group that visited, just from the political eye, because politics, you never know. What do you think? Could they be regrouping?
Well, I can't wish that away. You remember when we having the funeral service for Joyce Laboso in Bomet County? Yes. Raila Odinga did mention that President Kenyatta and Deputy President William Ruto were actually the part of the formation of the ODM, primarily when ODM was being formed. You remember way back, I think, in 2005.
Exactly.
And that tells you, in generality that there are no permanent enemies when it comes to politics, that we can always work together. Because I remember Raila Odinga and William Ruto, and of course even President Kenyatta by then, were actually supporting the referendum were opposing the referendum, the constitution in 2005, right, when ODM was being formed. When we went into 2007 elections, President Kenyatta decided actually to support the then President Kibaki, who was actually gunning for a second term, and Ruto was with Raila Odinga. Come 2013, Ruto and Uhuru actually came together.
Again.
But that said and done, the most important thing I think you want me to deal with is about Ruto and probably Franklin Bet. What does it tell us? It's a signal that people are regrouping, people are strategizing ahead of 2022 elections. President Kenyatta has made these passionate calls that probably we do not want to concentrate on actually active politics at the moment. But you know, the politicians will always have to strategize. You know, they can't wait until 2022. They have to see the best possible way moving forward.
Yes.
As for Isaac Ruto, you remember, he's worked with Raila even in 2013. He was actually a part of the key members that formed the NASA coalition, you remember. Franklin Bet was actually the head of secretariat, presidential secretariat for Raila Odinga in 2017 general election. You remember, 2013, I beg your pardon, general election. So these are people who have worked together at some point.
Yes.
They went different ways, but again, they're regrouping and coming back together and trying to see, moving forward, and in the coming elections, what is it that we can do together? But also don't forget that Raila Odinga holds a portfolio of being an AU envoy.
Yes.
There are so many other things, for example, infrastructure like the water.
Okay.
For example, in Kericho, that maybe these leaders also want to be constructed. So I think there are so many other things that they talk of, but more so, because they are politicians, it's more of politics than even developmental tours.
Wow, all right. Now, your byline is just it for me. When you just said it could be more political,
Yeah.
I leave, you know, they usually say leave politics to politicians.
Sure.
You might see this angle and then they ambush you with the other. But thank you so much for being here. I am enlightened as a Mwana Inchi, and I hope you are as well. If you followed this, please give us your feedback at KUTV Kenya, at Anki Doris, Mr. Samuel. Until next Tuesday?
Thursday I'll be here.
Oh,
Thursday,
of course. Looking forward to that. We take a very short break. We come back with the latest in the world of sports. You're watching KUTV News at 9.